Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show.
Good morning, Mike. Welcome back from out of town or out of country.
We've been, we recorded last Tuesday. That was like the last recording. I mean, we did live last Tuesday and then we recorded something for that Thursday last week. So after that, I was traveling. Tommy, you've been traveling. We've been all over the place a little bit here recently. I just kind of want to open up with a very interesting topic. Before I do that, before we do the news, let's talk about our main topic for today. Our main topic for today is going to be around naming conventions. Data Mark has a great article around fabric items and how he likes to apply naming conventions. I'd like to unpack this. Let's understand what he's talking about, like what naming conventions are, how he likes to use them, what kind of syntax he's using. I disagree with a lot of, not a lot. There's a couple areas here that I really disagree with some of his naming conventions. I don't like them. So I'm going to give you some of my opinion on some of this because I believe there's a lot of redundancy in his naming conventions. So we'll unpack that as we go. And also something he doesn't talk about here, which I want to explore some new features that Fabric is doing that I think will make it also easier for you to assist with your naming conventions. Okay, that being said, let's jump into the news for today. All right, Tommy, before we get going into the news, I just want to ask you, as I was contemplating traveling around doing things, I don't know your travel routine. We've gone on trips together a couple times. We've shown up. So what is your stance on travel? And are you a carry-on kind of person or do you do a checked suitcase kind of person? Like what's your vibe when you travel?
Dude, I'm all about optimization and just like thinking someone's always behind you. So I have a pretty optimized travel routine, especially when flying. My shoes are off at the same time I'm taking out my laptop before I even get my security.
You don't have TSA pre-check?
I need to. I'm so fast. I'm faster.
Oh man, Tommy.
I'm faster than pre-check. No, so I have such.
It's the fact that there's a line to get through pre-check. Like that's just getting to the place where you're going to be doing security. That's the problem. I'm like, I don't want to deal on lines everywhere, dude. Tommy, go get TSA pre-check. It's the best. I don't know, $85 or $100 you've ever spent traveling. That is worth your time to not hassle getting through the security lines. You would love that part.
So funny.
That is funny.
So I do have a system though.
Do you wear, so let's talk about security here real quick. So do you wear specific clothes going to the airport that will get through the metal detector? Like no jeans, no belts, you're intentionally wearing like slip-on shoes. Do you think about those things when you go through the airport? Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, my belt and watch are already off. I put them in my shoes.
No, Paulus, time out. You're one step behind where I'm at. I don't even wear.
You're saying packing.
Not even what I wear to go to I have a travel outfit that I use when I travel, and the travel outfit doesn't even allow me to wear a belt. It's a beltless outfit, and the shoes that I'm wearing again, I'm TSA pre-check, so I don't have to take off my shoes, but I intentionally pick shoes. So everything I pack has to be a certain way. So it's not like I'm taking things off quickly to get to the airport.
Yep.
I'm literally changing how I even get to the airport or what I wear the day of travel because I want to be more efficient.
See, I don't do all the packing, and I also I need to wear the belt, the nice shoes, rather than putting that in your suitcase. So I'm not a.
That's interesting.
Okay. I'm not a check. I'm carry on.
Yeah. Okay. Carry me too. I'm a carry on person. And how long can you go in a carry on? Like, have you kind of, how far?
6 days?
6 days? Oh, I think I can get 2 weeks in a carry-on. I think I can stretch it. And I think for me, when I think about carry-ons and what I'm doing for carry-ons, the weakness of a carry-on is the size of your pants. If you're bringing jeans and like thicker pants wherever you go, those things just take up so much space. You got to find going back to the travel thing, I go out and buy efficient foldable, rollable pants that take up even less space because pants are one of the largest items in your suitcase.
But what about
for women? It's probably very different. I mean, they can pack a whole bunch of different things, but like me, it's like pants take up the majority of the room. Everything else is pretty small.
Yeah, I'm pretty efficient in the travel routine. Getting there to the airport, I always have a place for my luggage. Like I always try to do one of the first few rows after the first class. That's where I put my suitcase.
Yep.
Because Why would you want to put a? I always look for something in front of me.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have been traveling really forever, even before your own thing too. What are some tips of the trade that you know?
All right. Well, let me give you some, like, Michael's lens of things going through travel stuff. Right. So one, I don't bring a second pair of shoes. Whatever shoes I'm wearing are the shoes I'm going to wear the entire trip. So I basically I design my whole outfit thing around the shoes. If it's comfortable shoes that I'm going with, so I have like these pair of Hokas right now. I like them, but they're running shoes. They're not very classy shoes, but I would say, like, so, when you travel to other countries, especially over in Europe, they don't wear sneakers everywhere. They maybe a couple of places you'll find them wearing some like running or jogger shoes, but mostly people wear like nice leather, good looking shoes. I haven't found a good looking pair of shoe that I like that's comfortable that lets me walk. So I'm still kind of hunting for that. So that's one thing. The other thing is, to your point, Tommy, I optimize on the pair of pants. Pants feel like they're a waste of time for me. And when I'm going through the airport, I'm always looking for other what appears to be business people. So if I'm going through security lines, I'm trying to align myself behind the individuals that have a suit coat or slacks on, or even the TS, like, so the airline people. So sometimes you'll get in like the TSA pre-check, and all of the stewardesses will go on through the checkout. Get behind them because they do travel so often, and they know exactly. They're super efficient. They don't waste any time. So when you want to avoid the mom, the dad, the kids, the stroller, anything that's like around, like a lot of, if there's kids involved, it's going to be slow and there's going to be confusion going on. So like I try and, like, again, I have kids. I travel with them. I am that person sometimes. So I understand that. So I intentionally pick lines where there's less kids and things. So those are some of my travel techniques. When I get to a place, like when I'm getting to a location, I can never sleep the first night. The first night is always rough. And I think it's because I don't know why. It's just wherever I get somewhere new and sleep, and whatever bed it is, it could be a comfortable bed. I'm just not exhausted enough to go to sleep. My mind's racing. I can't really calm down. So this is probably me admitting on publicly, like I have like a sleep apnea, sleep disorder, or something like that. So, but when I don't sleep, that first day, I do the whole day of training or conference or whatever the thing is. When I'm around a lot of people, I get really excited. I exert a lot of energy, and then the second and third day, I get much better sleep. So I'm like up late that first night, don't get a lot of sleep, do the second day of activities, and then usually I'm like exhausted enough from like walking around activities, and then I really start crashing and going to sleep. So that's kind of some of my tips or tricks. I'm trying to think of any other tips or tricks that I use. I have realized if I go to like fabric conferences, I'm less inclined to bring a carry-on to like big conferences where I know there's like going to be swag or giveaways or something like that, because I just don't want to be cramming everything into my backpacks and things. Oh, I remembered one. Your computer. So when you're going to places, I have found bringing a decent mouse wherever you go, a decent Bluetooth mouse. It's worth investing to get a good mouse and travel with that. So that's one that's pretty cool. The second thing is a travel monitor. You can buy these 15-inch thin panel displays that you just put in your bag, and it just goes with your computer, high resolution. Dude, I'm telling you, the higher resolution you can get, like a 15-inch little second monitor, holy cow. That's a game changer.
Dude, I saw you do that. That external monitor is
Game changer.
Integral.
Especially if you're presenting like a training thing, like you could have your notes on the one screen, but you can present from your main screen onto their projector or whatever. So you have to travel with it. So if you don't have a second travel screen, you have to get one. That is like by far. I have an Asus version. I'm gonna go see if I can find it on Amazon, and I'll put it in the chat window in case anyone who's actually traveling and looking to get a travel monitor. I'll go find that, and then I'll put it in the chat window here. But highly recommended. It's the way to go.
Dude, 1,000%. I know we keep talking about traveling, but there are rules of the road when it comes to traveling. Okay. Another day, I want to just talk about things that bug me about traveling, and I wish more people were optimized.
Give me one or two things that bug you. Just give me one thing. Let's do that. Just give me one thing that bugs you about traveling.
when you're in line somewhere, because you're always in line at the airport or at the hotel, so you're always going to be in line. You know what's going to happen. People know that they're going to have to take their shoes off or take their computer out. Why aren't people doing this as fast as possible and trying to plan it out?
Yeah.
People taking their time, I cannot stand. Also, the biggest thing I learned, when you arrive somewhere,
Hmm.
go to departures. That's where you want to leave from, not the arrival section.
Hmm.
That's a game changer.
I've heard about that too. Yeah, I haven't done that one, but it's easier for you to walk through departures back up to the, the arrivals or the security desks than it is to go
Mhm.
right to the departures, because the departures, especially in Seattle feels like it's like another hack where there's a lot more people, especially when you're traveling. A lot of people are coming in when you're coming in because of conferences and things like that. So if you're leaving, there's usually another wave of people coming in. So there's a lot of people leaving at the same time as well. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I wonder if that's something else, like the idea of like when you're arriving to an airport, there's like a condensed area. Like if you think about where people leave for the airport, you leave the airport, some go to public transportation, some get an Uber, which is like hidden away inside um the parking garage. Some people just get a taxi, and there's like a whole taxi area. So I guess maybe like the idea is like if you arrive at departures, it is there's the distribution of people is much wider because they're going different places to get out of the airport. But when you come into arrivals, it's like one road with like the list of the airlines in one area. It's a very condensed area compared to like when you leave, it's not very condensed.
Yeah, exactly.
Which makes total sense. Interesting. Okay, fair. Any other things that annoy you or bug you?
I think that's good, dude. We have a lot. We have a lot to talk.
All right, let's move on. Let's actually do some news articles. Tommy, you picked up a couple things here that are kind of relevant to talk about here. Before we do, like, I guess Fabric just released their February update blog recently. It was, I think that was released last week. Tommy, we weren't around for that one, right? Okay. So Patrick from Guy in a Cube released the blog. There's a lot of really good content there. We'll get to that in a moment. But one feature that was announced by, I believe, Aaron, I think is how you say their name. Aaron released AI functions for seamless integration with Gen AI. What does Gen AI mean? Is that like generation?
Generative AI.
Generative AI. Okay, so it's not like okay. So generative AI. Okay, so let's talk about this one. Let's unpack. It comes with a little YouTube video. There's some things on there. Let's. What does this mean, Tommy? What is this? Why do we care about this stuff?
So obviously, we know that AI is just being a part of more and more what we do, and we have our co-pilots, we have our assistant and tools, we have our ChatGPT. But what the AI functions, and especially more customized in Fabric, this is a big deal because there's a ton of things that we can now interact. Not just Copilot helping us with code, but actually going through and functions that were kind of almost in Azure machine learning, like analyzing the sentiment, fix grammar in a column, which Copilot right now cannot do. It cannot iterate row by row or in a data frame. It can tell you based on what you want to do, but it's not going to look at the values and tell you if the values are good or bad, and if to summarize the data, your data. And these AI functions and generative AI is simply just taking gobs and gobs of content, both text, and I believe I read even images work with this as well, but gobs and gobs of content as input, and being able to classify, generalize, and condense that into something that's legible. So some of these out of the box functions that are available,
Let's talk about
looking at
those.
yeah,
Let's
so
unpack some of those. Let me understand. I'm trying to wrap my head around like the mechanics of this, right? So it sounds to me like what you're doing is this is on a Spark notebook. So let's clarify here, right? A couple things to kind of quantify about what these AI functions mean, right? They're not just running in a Power BI report. They're not running in Power Query. They're specifically designed for data engineering workloads. When we start talking data engineering, we're immediately talking notebooks. So with the release of this, now you can go to a notebook, and from said notebook, you can write a data frame. And it does talk about starting to use these AI functions. You have to hard install on the machine, the cluster that you're going to run. It's doing a pip install, which means go get packages from the internet, bring them forward and load them on the machines that you're going to run the AI on. So you're physically adding code to your clusters to make this work. Cool. I like
Yeah.
it. But then the different functions you can use are like, I guess these are like tuned models that you're kind of like they're distilled down to just like a single function or a group of functions.
Yeah.
So what kind of functions are we looking at here, Tommy?
So some of the bigger ones is if you had a data frame you wanted to analyze the sentiment in text. I think the biggest ones for users are going to be looking at fixing grammar,
Well, hang on.
summarizing.
Let's slow
Yeah,
down and say,
yeah.
slow down. Let's go AI analyze sentiment. So AI sentiment or sentiment analysis on a bit of text or phrases of text. It gives you like a score typically between like negative or like, not positive, it being like a 0 or lower score, and a higher like 2-1 would be a higher, more positive score. So you could, sentiment, favorable or non-favorable based on sentiment analysis. I think that's what that's doing.
Yeah.
But sentiment analysis, when I look at data science things, like every intern or beginner program of whatever data science is doing, it's always like step one. First project you do, make a data frame, throw some text at it and say, okay, let's do a sentiment analysis. Like super basic stuff. All right. So that not, okay, fine. Let's go through another one.
I think one of the biggest ones is probably going to be this translate for a lot of users. So it can actually translate from one language to another.
I don't think that's a big deal. I don't think, I mean, maybe in Europe, this is a bigger deal, but in the US, I don't think we're doing a whole lot of translation between different languages. Potentially, if we're getting text from a system that has potential input from other places.
Oh,
I don't have a lot of data sources that I'm not translating in my report for some other people. Like maybe it's a use case, definitely a use case, but is it common? No, I don't think so.
okay. Then I know what you're looking for. The big winner here is going to be your AI extract and
Yes.
AI classify. But
I think those are going to be more useful because you're going to, how do you take a bunch of text and extract key topics? Like imagine, snippets of text from the podcast. This is something I'd like to get into, Tommy. I'd like to take transcripts of our podcast and run this through classifying and AI extracting to get like keywords, topics, things that we're talking about out of this and see like what it does. AI summary. I think when I think about what AI is best at doing from my perspective, I like the AI. It's becoming commonplace. It's not really AI anymore, but it feels so commonplace. When you record a meeting on Teams and you have Teams, I guess Pro or whatever, premium Teams Premium, I guess is what it's called. It has this whole read out the transcript and then it gives you like, here's the key topics. Here's the main points. Tommy talked about this. Mike talked about this. I can't tell you how useful that is. That's really important. So I think summarize is going to be pretty important as well.
And then the extract is just going to be easy for people too, because it's easy just to get, hey, from this column, get the email address, get the domain, find a company name, which are things we've tried to Google and Power Query forever.
Yes.
So that's going to be really nice. But I think that another big part here, Mike, besides the out of the box, is if you were to try to use this right now with the current AI functions, you would need a high capacity to do so from Fabric.
Mm-hmm.
However, they are allowing you to configure AI functions to work with Azure OpenAI. So you can actually have your own custom
correct.
skills. To me, this is pretty important, and I'm very, very happy to see this.
Yeah, you're a big AI person in general, and so there's a bit of notes. You have to kind of click on the documentation to get out of the article into some other places, but it starts talking about how you want to install OpenAI. So, a couple caveats here. When you're installing these things, this is only available in Spark 1.3 runtime, or the Microsoft's runtime of Spark, right? So Microsoft versions their runtime in like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and that is a bundle of SemPy, Python libraries, the Python version that it's in. So it's a little bit behind what's actually out there in open source, but Microsoft fairly quickly updates their things and has them come along for the ride. So you have to be on runtime 1.3 for Spark to use this stuff. And then it's pretty simple. I mean, you can just do, import OpenAI library and you can start using it. So that's actually pretty helpful.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure here because right now I'm looking at the prerequisites, and at least with the transform with AI functions, this is what it says. You also need a F64 or higher SKU or a P SKU with a smaller capacity resource. You need to provide AI functions with your own Azure OpenAI resource using custom configs. So I don't know if that means if
That
I
means
don't have it.
that means you're spinning up like a piece of hardware in Azure and you're connecting to that and
So
using that as the runner.
if
Like
I don't
it's
have an X64,
yeah, it feels like what they're
okay,
saying here is
we said this.
yeah, you're offloading like an open AI. Like so instead of having the Fabric Spark
Yeah.
cluster do the compute, and what it probably does is it's running some compute units and it's charging you CU back to your in library. So like, okay, here, send some data to this thing, do a processing thing, and then it just counts up how many CUs you use and just charges back to your account. But I think what they're saying is on these smaller clusters, you're going because AI is so much more expensive than other things. They're trying to give you an out that says, okay, well, you can configure it. Like if you want to have your own open AI resource in Azure, that's not in Fabric, then you're billed totally separately. It's just whatever the open AI cost is. I
Okay.
haven't, I gotta be frankly honest, I have not spun up an Azure based resource that is open AI. So I don't really know how you get that or how you would configure it, turn that on.
It's pretty simple. It's just the AI Foundry, but hopefully that means too other things are going to open up for us that are Copilot, not just AI functions where we can use our own Azure resource.
I don't like using the word Copilot in this situation, Tommy, just for the fact that Copilot implies it's like Microsoft's flavor of Copilot. I think I want to talk about like you can use your own language model, right? Because in this example here, they're using OpenAI. That's not Copilot. Copilot is not OpenAI. Microsoft has invested heavily in OpenAI, but it's not Copilot. Copilot is this branded experience. And the thing I get stuck with is I've seen people trying to take DAX statements and put it into Word Copilot because they think it's the same Copilot across all tools. It's not. Like Copilot is different. You can't write DAX queries in Copilot that's designed for Word, or you can't take DAX and shove it over in Excel. It's not the same thing. It's not the same Copilot. So like you have to use the Copilot where it's at because that Copilot is tuned for the experience you're looking for. And I think people are trying this because they want to start using Copilot in Power BI, but they can't get it unless they're at an F64 level, which again, I'll reach out to Microsoft. I'll say it again, Microsoft, you need to figure out how to bring Copilot down to a lower SKU. It's people want to use it, but they can't because it's at an F64 threshold. I don't think it's a good solution.
So I think this is a big deal, and I'm glad to see this again. Hopefully, the integration with Azure AI resources, you can build your own functions,
Yes.
can be a big help for teams.
Yeah, that's another thing too, Tommy. I don't really build my own open AI functions, but I guess if you had other functions you were bringing, you could bring those in as well for you.
Yeah.
There is so just as out of curiosity, I went to the Azure Marketplace to see if I could go install something in my Azure resource group, and there is an Azure Open AI service that you can create inside like Fabric inside Azure directly. So you can use OpenAI's powerful language models directly in the service. I do know there's also GitHub too. So GitHub has a whole bunch of like GitHub models. I don't know if you could integrate with that either. That'd be also interesting if
No.
you could like.
So because with the AI resource, you basically configure the tokens, the prompt, that it's integrated with Microsoft's services in your tenant.
But when you bring your custom, when you bring the custom one, that was where I would like. So yes, Microsoft needs to think. My opinion here on this one, right? Microsoft needs to think more holistically around just not just open AI for everything, but they need to think like there's a lot of models on GitHub. Help me integrate with those models and again they're just API calls, so I'm pretty sure you could probably integrate them with them anyways and just make a REST call to the models on GitHub. But GitHub's doing a lot of things around model stuff as well. And I'd like to see some more integration between what GitHub's doing and what the Fabric environment is also doing. Anyways, okay, that's another big topic. Last news item, and I promise we'll get on to the main topic here. All right, Tommy, what's the other news article you have for us today?
So I did have just a few other highlights from the Fabric updates, but Mike, you have kind of a Microsoft announcement, a PSA about your, and this is kind of crazy, but I'll let you kind of jump into it.
There's a couple announcements I'm making, but like, what are you thinking here? Which one's the one you're actually trying?
The 32.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So I do want to point out Microsoft at the very beginning of their blog, they point out upgrade Power BI Desktop to 64-bit version. And also, I believe there's a note here about third-party visuals that I think have been fixed in the most recent February version as well. So two big points. The 32-bit of Power BI, and if you're on a computer that or your organization is only deploying 32-bit Power BI to you, be aware the 32-bit version of Power BI Desktop is disappearing in 6/30/2025. So you've got 3 months to transition to a 64-bit version of Power BI. Now, I'm not sure how big the audience is with that. I did hear a couple other MVPs chatting about this, like, oh, my work computer doesn't let me have it. Like, there's some restrictions. They're just installing the 32-bit version just because that's what they set up like eons ago and never made the migration. But if you're in the Center of Excellence or if you're in the admin area of Power BI, you might want to make sure that your IT group is in line with the move to going to 64-bit Power BI desktop versions. And they're going to stop support. I think you could probably still download it and keep it, but you're going to stop getting updates. There's going to be no more support. They're not going to release any more 32-bit versions of software. So I just want to point that out.
It's more common than you think.
Really? You think?
I remember when we got our PC probably 5 years ago, everyone got a new PC. Everything was 32. And the only reason I knew was because Microsoft Access connector
yes.
didn't work with 32.
Yeah. So now just be aware, you've got to move to 64-bit. That's the only thing you're going to be able to use moving forward. And then I think it makes sense. Microsoft doesn't need to support all these other things anymore, because I'd also agree, like, Microsoft's doing a lot in the space of like PowerBI.com. Like PowerBI.com is becoming pretty rich for like building reporting like experiences. And to me, desktop feels a lot like the report pages, the report authoring. But if I think about what's actually happening in the service, we have a lot of other tools that really aid like analytics for the business team, metric sets, KPI, or the scorecards, explorations, notebooks. Viewing notebooks is like a view only inside an order, right? So like, if I think about all the different experiences, so like there's an experience of like a report with pages, a data app basically, and I saw a demo of Translytical. So I went out to Power BI Netherlands, their Power BI user group, and they did a demo of Translytical inside the Netherlands. Amazing. Like, stay tuned. There's a session coming at FabCon talking about Translytical. It's coming to Power BI. You're going to want to stay in tune with this, because this is really making less of a Power BI report read only. It's a very interactive report at some point. So really interesting things you can start doing there as well when you start using Translytical in your reports. Yeah, I like this one. This is a good update. Just a note about that one. Any other things that came out in the February release, Tommy, that you would want to kind of point out or highlight?
Yeah, there's a ton on the AI science. I do want to just mention a few things on the OneLake catalog, just because it's getting more and more integrated. And I think it went, just with so many things, it's hard for everything to be the highlight. But two things on the OneLake catalog that I really like, because I'm using it more and more. I'm really using it to find, organize.
Yep.
So the first one, I think, for Teams, and I love that they've done this, is the OneLake catalog is now available in Microsoft Teams, which is, I think, is a great experience. People live in Teams.
You mean like when they're like using Power BI inside Teams, the OneLake catalog now exposes information to you, yes?
Yeah, exactly, as a channel in Microsoft Teams. So, and I think that's big, because a lot of people just live in Teams. So just a little, but I think necessary thing. But the thing I really like, I don't know if you saw this yet, but in the OneLake catalog, what we saw from Microsoft Ignite, there is the govern your individual data state with the OneLake catalog. There's a new tab in the OneLake all around governing, which is awesome.
And this is what we should be starting to see. So to me, like, the OneLake is turning into, especially the OneLake catalog, it's turning into a place to discover data, a place to find certified, promoted, like, content. So this is the thing that actually reduces data silos. And one thing I don't see quite yet, but I'm hoping it gets there, is, imagine, Tommy, you and I are creators of content or authoring of certified or not certified content. I think we need a little bit more control around us as creators, saying, look, we're really going to focus in on who is allowed to discover the data, what kind of descriptions are the data, and then can you see samples of that data? Like, so there needs to be like more layer, like think of it like an onion, right? It's more layers to the onion of like how much as a data author do I want to allow people to discover and use or see samples of that data. One thing is I think will definitely drive this, just I think re-emphasizes to me how important it is to document your models.
My
Like,
gosh.
this is like even if you had AI, let's just imagine you had the world's best AI. If the AI can't understand what the description of a column is and how it might be
Yeah.
used, there's no use to like throwing AI at a model to help you discuss. So in all these situations, it's going to increase the importance of developers building proper descriptions, writing out detailed information about what's either in the column, what kind of data is there, what the data type looks like. You're going to need a lot more summary statistics around like what this column is doing, and putting that back into the model as descriptions and or annotations, because then you can throw this at the AI, the catalog, all these other things, and users can then go see exactly what they're looking for. So I think this is going to
Yeah.
be a great next step.
I really hope that this is also something that we're going to be able to customize as admins or as the developers. Because right now,
Mhm.
again, the big ticket items are items that are endorsed, items that are not inactive or need to be refreshed.
Sure.
Add tags, right? So items
Yeah.
with descriptions, items with the last refresh date, which is, I think, great. But again, from actually having columns and how important that is, column descriptions or meta descriptions,
Sure.
that's not something that's going to show up here yet. So I think a lot of this is already built utilizing domains and tags. So
I agree with that. This domains and tags is actually going to lead us right into our main topic. So is there anything else, Tommy, you want to kind of call it here on the February monthly release? And again, I'll also argue here, there's some good things coming out in the February release. There's not a ton because I think they're kind of holding back some announcements for the Microsoft Fabric conference that's coming up at the end of the month. So I think they're going to um, um, open up more things. One thing you'll note though, if you even look at the Fabric, like if you look at the blog of this Fabric blog, again, it's this Fabric blog. It does contain some things about Power BI, but look at all the sections here: data engineering, data science, data warehousing, real-time intelligence. There's a lot of bullet points coming out every month of like things to explore. A lot of things are being added. So there's a lot of really exciting new features coming out. So it's good. The product's moving along at a good clip, I think. All right, Tommy. Anything else for news, or should we just move on?
I think we're ready to dive in.
Okay. So let me grab the main article here. So this is an article by Mark. He goes by Data Mark is his blog, and he's talking through structuring Fabric items by using naming conventions. So I'll put the link here in the chat window. All right, Tommy, what do you think? Let's unpack naming. Let's define what naming conventions are. Why would we use naming conventions? Let's talk about that.
Oh man, I am so happy to see this in Fabric. So, naming conventions, nomenclature, abbreviations, you may have used them or have heard of them, but it's really all about creating a consistent and reliable set of wording to help understand what content you have. For example, you may have a sales department, and your sales abbreviation maybe just sales, marketing's MKT, finance FIN. So you know these abbreviations and these kind of code words that help understand more about your business. With all the things we have in Fabric, more than just dashboards and reports and models. We have so many types of artifacts that as we start creating items, it gets very difficult to understand not just what type of item it is, but where does that item fit in what workflow and what process and what project is it being worked on. We can add task flows, we can add tags, but it's very hard just by looking at a name. If you have, notebook, data pull.
Yep. Notebook 1, Notebook 2.
So this is something very commonly used in Azure or usually IT, but this is actually something, Mike, that we implemented in one of my first kind of data analyst roles and nomenclature or name conventions for our reports and dashboards.
Sure.
Especially when it was consumer based. So to help people understand it was sales operations or sales, we didn't have apps at the time, and
Sure.
we were very stringent around this.
So let me give you. So yes, I agree with all these things. Let me abstractly talk about naming conventions at a very high level, right? I think the reason naming conventions exist is because the UI that you're given from whatever that may be, right? So people talk about this. What's the naming convention in Azure? What's our naming convention in Fabric? What is so there's like a standard or something you would adopt around naming conventions. So let's unpack that. Why do they exist? They exist to sort things in a specific way for you to easily understand what it is you're trying to go access or edit or change, right? So that's how I unpack it, right? The naming conventions is a way of you digesting information, right? How do you relate to the items that are inside that workspace? Now, when you first had Power BI, there was no folders, and it was like reports and semantic models,
Yeah.
right? And the icons distinguish. So one of the things that really gets me here that I'm going to read Mark's article a little bit here. So he talks a little bit at the beginning of the article talking about the structure. He has like this structure type. He says, he usually uses one or two characters to define the item type. So this is the item type that he's building. And then he has other things here. He puts like an underscore, and then he has the next 4 to 8 characters as like, what is the item's purpose? What is it doing? And he has like abbreviations that go along with this one. One of these things is, my opinion is, I don't like this. I don't like this very hardened, rigid schema of this thing. And for me, I like to organize content on how it's used. What is the lineage of the content, right? Let me give you an example, right? Imagine you have an orchestration pipeline. The orchestration pipeline calls a series of notebooks, data flows, and maybe other things like, whatever, right? So that orchestration pipeline goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's different actions that are happening in a sequence. I want the items that are attached to that pipeline to have a naming convention that maps what the pipeline's doing. So for example, if I have a pipeline that is orchestrating things, I like to start the main pipeline with a numbers, actually. I don't really actually like to use this item type.
Really?
Yeah. So he uses, in this example, Mark uses, he goes item type. The first 2 things of the name of something is what it is. I'm like, that's redundant. That's wasted information and wasted space. I absolutely hate this observation. Why would you go use the icon for data flow and start it with the words DF for data flow? There's 2 other indicators that this is a data flow. And honestly, if you can't recognize the item based on the icon itself, you shouldn't be in Fabric, honestly. Like, if you don't know what a data flow icon
that is a hot take, dude.
Dude, I'm telling you, like, it's not hard. This is not hard. And if you don't know what a lake house is versus like a data warehouse icon, you should learn that. I rather would lean on the icon of the object more than I would the name of it. That's irrelevant to me. Now, maybe if you're pulling a lot of this data from APIs, maybe that's going to provide you some assistance. But we're in a graphical world in Power BI. Everything comes with an icon, no matter where you are. So I disagree with this whole naming convention on the item type first. Don't like it. I instead like to do the order in which things are called. Other items. Sorry, my connection dropped there for a second. Are you still there?
I'm here. I still got you. It was too hot of a take. It was too hot of a take.
The internet said no. So let me pause on my hot take there, Tommy, and I'll just stand back and let you digest my hot take. So item type is the first section Mark talks about in the naming convention, where you say copy job is CJ, data pipeline would be DP, data flow would be DF. I don't like that. I think that's a waste of space. What do you think?
You know what? At first I was going to poo-poo what you're going to say, but I was thinking about all my nomenclatures and naming conventions that we've always created.
Yep.
It makes sense because I'm looking at Power BI right now, or Fabric.
Go into Fabric.
No.
Just look at items that have dependencies in them. Like you can go to the dependency tree and see it, but it's not as easy as like saying, okay, this is the master pipeline. This is 00. So 00 pipe, nightly run, right? That's the main pipeline. Or you have 00 weekly run, right? So, and then that pipeline calls another pipeline and calls another notebook, and you should sequence those things by numbers. So that way, when I'm going to powerbi.com, I can see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I know the sequence of things right in line, all right there. Boom, easy.
To your point, when it comes to the type, not just the icon, but literally the second column or third, if you're using Git, is also saying that.
You can't remove the column. It's there anyways. So why am I adding a third layer of information on a row of data in Power BI.com? Like that's not relevant. I don't think it's useful. So I understand why Mark's doing it. It may be more of like a programmatic or a coding thing that he's trying to get out later on, but I don't like it. I don't like, and if you, never start a report with Garrett, you're right on point. I hate this. I'm sorry, I'm burnt on this one. I'm already hot on this. Don't start your report with the thing that says RPT report. Duh. I know what the icon looks like for a report. Don't need it. Don't put report in front of it. Name the dumb thing what it is, because now when you go to like an org app or an app, you're now renaming it to be something else anyways, and it's actually named what it is. Like, so it's meaningless to me. That is an old convention from an era long gone. It doesn't need to be used anymore.
You know what? I think I can jive with that. I can jive with that with the item types. But what you're saying then is for your first type is more or less what process.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm talking, and maybe my thing is a bit more designed towards like data engineering, right? So data engineering has a lot of artifacts that depend on other artifacts to be used, right? If you have a single semantic model, I'm not going to name semantic model 01 and then every report that depends on it 02, 03, 04. That doesn't make sense, right? There is the semantic model or main sales semantic model, right? You do need to have some information on like what information is in it, right? What information is there? And also I'll argue too, Power BI.com gives you the ability to go into your semantic models and have descriptions of them. You should have descriptions on your semantic model. So if it's sales master data or sales data, that's what you should be calling it. Call it what it is as early as possible. And then use the description, write a description like this is sales data from this year to this year. Like that's what that part's for. And now, Tommy, back to your point on the data catalog.
Yeah.
Like, do I really care now? Now, here's where things get a little bit more interesting. Later on in Mark's article, he starts talking about abbreviations. So what is the item's purpose? Here is a little bit more gray in my mind. Like if you're doing orchestration, maybe I want to know that on the name of the item. Is it ingestion? Is it transformations? Is it storing data? So Mark has abbreviated a couple things, and I think this is medium level useful to me. But what I would also argue, these naming conventions feel like they were made in a time where we didn't have tags or domains. So to me, the item purpose should be a tag. That should not be the name of the item. And so traditionally, I would have named traditionally, I would have made the item purpose a name item. But now with tagging, I don't care. Take all of Mark's tags, add them as actual tags, and don't abbreviate them. They don't need to be abbreviated anymore. Like, duh. So I agree. I disagree with this one too.
Okay, so I'm gonna push back a little here because I think you've gone a step too far.
Sure.
There's a few things here. One, yes, I want to at least make a point for the item type 2 because I think there's still something to be said, but I really want to focus on what you're talking about with the purpose. You know how Power BI sorts by default?
Alphabetically.
And
that's why
that
is the most at the front.
Okay.
So and it just automatically orders the things in the order in which they're used.
Fine. So we have numbers for projects that numbers always mean a lot to people, especially when they're 10001.
Okay, I'm gonna get you on this one because there's actually version numbers I do think matters, and that's at the end of your line. Yeah, okay,
exactly.
I like where you're going with this one.
So one thing I think there is something to be said that the start of your item, the naming convention, is important because it's a lot easier to see. Because I'm like, I need to find my notebooks because that's the one. If anything, has to be the most consistent, or in a sense, a set of allowed values.
I've gotten so lost in notebooks that call other notebooks and that they're not sequenced. I don't know which notebook's calling which notebook. And you have to go into every notebook to see when it's called in what sequence. That's not helpful.
And I think that's where the item purpose is. I like the idea here, but I agree with you. This is something that could be a tag. It doesn't need to be in the name of it.
Yes.
This needs to be a little more flexible, this middle part here, where to me, it's dealing
with
item
the purpose. You're talking about item. Yeah.
We're in the second part of the convention here.
Yeah, correct. So the first one was like the abbreviation, like we kind of agree, like naming it by what it actually is irrelevant. that's you shouldn't be using that. The second part here is like, what do you use it for? What's the item description? Yeah. And I think this one we have a little bit more leeway here. I'm not sure I would be so rigid as what Mark has here, but I also would argue like I don't know if I need the item description because now we have tags, and tags can be applied to everywhere. And what you'll notice is if you go into the orchestration or the OneLake, if you go into the OneLake catalog, you can filter by tag. So the idea is so I know what I'm looking for, Tommy. I'm going to my workspace. I'm looking for a raw data format, or I'm looking for something that's ingestion only, right? If you define that, that's an ingestion tag. You add that tag to the item and you just filter by it. And this is,
Sure.
it's boom.
So
Everything in your list is now automatically filtered by ingestion
the,
stuff.
the only problem with the tags is I wish it was an easier way to quickly add a tags to
I agree
multiple
with you.
items.
It's
So,
it's driven only by the admin. Yeah, I agree. 100%
right,
agree with
you
you
want
there.
to search on that space. To
Yeah.
me, this item purpose, because you're just going to get a lot of redundancy, I think, with what he's saying here on what type of thing you're trying to do. To me,
What do you
to
mean?
your point, so like right now, some of the things that Datamark has is ingest, transform, store, analyze. It's basically all the different types of
Sure.
task flows.
Okay.
Like it's just those like
Oh, I
groups.
see what you're saying. So
Yeah,
and so again, your argument here may also be is like, well, don't even use these. Use task
that's
flows
redundant.
to hold
Right.
that information. I'd agree.
Right. Right. So to
Task flows.
me, yeah,
Yeah, I'm with you.
we need something custom, because here's the thing. I think this is where you're getting, Mike, with the first two codes, the
Yep.
item type, item purpose.
Yep.
This was a world that I used to work
And no
in
filtering.
for no filtering. This is a world I lived in when this was essential. When I lived in, when you're
Yes.
tracking things,
Yep.
when there's browser cookies going, I need to create an ID. I don't need to create a custom ID for the name, like,
Yes.
and so to follow this, because I have other things. What I want in this middle part, I want something flexible for projects. To me, this is where you can search for, hey, all my projects that we're dealing with, our marketing, getting our marketing integration data in.
Mm-hmm.
That's the middle part here, kind of thing. This is the meat that's custom to you, not something global for anyone who's in Fabric.
Yes.
So if we're doing a marketing, we're doing our e-commerce to Lakehouse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to your point, it does need to stay the same, but I think there's some confluence or center of excellence that does have, here's all the current projects.
Correct. I would agree with this 100%.
Because the point of having the code is not just the organizing, but your point is searching. So,
and it's making sure everyone knows what you're talking about, right? So he has a lot of things in here like INGST, like a new user that's coming into your organization. I wouldn't expect for them to know what INGST means. We know it means ingestion, but this is where I would also argue a little bit here is, lean on actual information. And this is funny because when I go look at his in the bottom part of the article here, and it shows exactly what I'm talking about. He has literally an example of an orchestration pipeline where there's a task that has batch orchestration. So he's using an abbreviation on an item that's already colored by green, and he has the full word called batch orchestration already in the line item. So all you're doing is taking up more space. That should just be, 00 nightly batch. That's it. That the information of the item should tell you what it does. All the other tagging, domain, like you have the data, the task flows, that's going to carry all the other characteristics of what it does. And you can even define, like, the task flow has a description. So like when items are in that box, in that color, you can even say, okay, this is orchestration, and you can write a description. This is orchestrating data from these different things. It runs every night, blah, blah, blah. You can define all of that inside the task on the page. Like, why am I?
No, I completely agree. I completely agree. So, are we in agreement on that second character code where it's kind of like a project that you set up, like it's our marketing?
Yeah. I think I would probably put more emphasis on the first 2 digits or 3 digits. But sometimes I do like a 3-digit number in the very beginning, because sometimes I'm thinking, like, if a project is going to be unstable and I might need to add things in the middle, so I'll do like 000 or 00 for like starting things. And if I have to like do something where it's like, okay, I'm doing a level 10. What is level 10? Level 10 might be like initially loading things. So it'd be like 10, and then I would use 10, 11, 12, 13. That only gives you 10 items in that space. So you can kind of do some weird, because again, you're trying to filter it by the ordering of things in the list. And like, you want things to sort out correctly when you look at it by name. That's kind of what I'm doing there.
Okay. Question. Let's dive into your first character, because I think a lot of people are going to have contention with this. Walk me through, because you said version history. You're saying
version at the end. So I would typically, so when I build things in Azure, I'm always putting like an 01, 02, 03 on the end of things, just because I'm usually confident I've got it right, but I don't want to have the, like, inevitably I need to make a second version of some kind of artifact inside Azure. And so when I do that, I like having the version number, a 2-digit number at the end where that I can version things with. And I'll do this even with my Lakehouse. Like, Tommy, we did a learning fabric series on YouTube, and we made like the Great Lake House. I would have named, so the Great Lake is the name of the lake. I would have put a version number at the end of that, _01, right? So that way, when I want to, test out a new thing or build a new version, I would do a Great Lake 02, and that would be the next iteration of that data or that object. So I do think that's relevant.
Okay. So I'm listening to that. So, but is this first part, if we're not doing the item type, if we're not doing the project,
yep.
How do you decide what the first 3 characters are? Or
so sometimes I've done
I think this is a
couple different things, right? So it depends on how much stuff you're orchestrating or pulling together. So for example, if it's the very first thing I'm doing to touch data, it usually starts with all zeros. It's 0, 0, 0, and then the thing that I'm doing. So if I'm in a data engineering process, I'll do 3 zeros and then the name of the item, like the data topical area of what that is, right? This is the orchestration pipeline, or SAP data load, something like that. So it's descriptive. And then I would put a version number at the end of that. Then I start moving into like the next layer of things, right? So if I'm doing like a series of notebooks, right, I'll use like 20, 21, 22, or 10, 11, 12, 13. So 10, 11, 12, 13 means I'm now in the space of like, I'm going to run a bunch of notebooks, or I'm going to run a series of pipelines. So my 00 is like the very first pipeline that I run that orchestrates everything. The second version is 10 or 20, whatever, kind of, just keeps the numbers up.
I'm hearing you.
So 10, 20, 30. So 10 would be the first item in the pipeline that's called. 11 would be the second item. 12 would be the next item. So then you have the ability to sequence those pipelines together. And then if you're doing like notebooks or further transformations, 20 is the next section after that, right? So when you think about a data engineering process, I'm usually running an orchestration pipeline. I'm running a pipeline to load the raw data into that first layer. And then I'm doing silver transformations or gold transformations. And those notebooks are typically sequenced behind each other, right? I have to finish all the data calculations for silver before I go to the next section called gold. So I'll start sequencing those things in order of numbers. And sometimes I like leaving gaps between like, okay, these are the 10s, these are the 20s, these are the 30s. But regardless, however I'm looking at the information, I can always step back and say, okay, there's already a ordered sequence of things. And I know if I want to go earlier in the process, I go to the lower numbers. So that's just instinctively how I think about it. It kind of depends on how many items I think I need to make, how many notebooks are going to be there. And maybe the 10s are all pipelines, maybe the 20s are all notebooks. It kind of changes maybe per project. But again, generally thinking is as I mature the data deeper and deeper and deeper, I'll just keep increasing the numbers. And the final thought here is you can use this, you don't have to, but when you get to semantic models can pull from different areas in the system, right? So a semantic model could pull from silver, semantic models typically pull from gold, and now with Direct Lake, we could kind of pull a mix of both now a little bit. So when I build semantic models, I'll probably just pick like a very simple number like 60, and just all the semantic models will start with 60. So that's at the end of my pipeline, and it may skip a couple numbers to get there. I'll also do things like, like 100 or something. A 100 may be testing only, right? Everything in the 100 levels, like 101, 102, 103, something I'm going to throw away. It doesn't have to live on perpetually, but that falls down to the end or the bottom of the list because that's not core to what we're doing. Okay. So maybe I'll use that on semantic models. Typically, I do not, though. So semantic models, when I build them, those are typically just the domain name or the domain or topic, sales data. Because I want that to be more human readable. As I'm going further through the pipeline, I'm being more mindful of more and more people are going to potentially, a wider audience is appearing for that item. I don't want a bunch of numbers when I have hundreds of people trying to search for, which data set is this? Is this 60 or 70? Doesn't make sense when you go to catalog and you have to search for the number.
So I think we need a whole other episode on how we actually implement this, because I love the article, and I do want to say this to Datamark too. This is essential. Like, this is so important that
You've got to think this through.
you have to think this through. And it's easier said than done too, especially when you're dealing with even a team, right? And I would love to talk about in a future, another future point, just about how do you actually ensure people follow the process? How do you create that, in a sense, your own nomenclature? But this is just basic stuff, especially that I see even in some of my folders. I'm like, I need to quickly create something. I'm testing something, and immediately I don't know where the lineage is. I need to go through one lake. I need to find item lineage. So this is something that it takes time to, in a sense, start, because again, this is that blessing and the curse of, it's so easy to create anything in Fabric. It's too easy to create an item and an artifact that things can get very cluttered very quickly.
But I would like to argue the point of like there are a lot of so Microsoft is very much enhancing the discoverability of items. And so like when I was first building things, I've changed a lot of how I've naming conventioned things. I think in the beginning, what Datamark describes is something I would have started using in the very beginning when it was not as clear. But now that I have like domains, tagging, I now have the ability to use task flows. All of these things are really required to help you understand where they are in the process. So, and I also would argue more of this naming convention is important for things that are certified than things that are not. So non-certified things, I'm going to be more lenient around sure, name it what makes sense to you. If you don't like my number naming convention in the front, don't care, build what you want. I'm not going to be as hard, but I will say in order to move your items from where they were to now a certified data set, then I think you for sure sit back and say, let's apply our naming convention that is, by the way, documented in our center of excellence, and people can say, you can refer to it. So then so you can say, no, this is not what we're doing. I can't tell you no to something unless you have a documented resource that tells you what you should do. This is what we're going to follow. And it only takes a couple no's for people to start getting their mind around I should be doing this. This is something, this is important to us as an organization. So
1,000%.
I can't stress that enough as far as that's going to be important for you to kind of spend some time evaluating and thinking through. Anyways, any other final thoughts here, Tommy, for you?
No, honestly, for me, it's about freaking time that someone wrote and tried to create a universal standardized naming convention for Fabric. Because a lot of people are not coming from that Azure world or that IT world or Databricks too, where this is just it's a fundamental part of your workflow, especially that it's about. I'm surprised I haven't seen more writing and talking about this just from other MVPs.
No one cares. This is the naming conventions come from when I talk to people in Power BI, no one cares about naming conventions. They just kind of name it whatever it is. They just figure it out. There's lineage things that's a Power BI world of things. That is a business mindset of coming into Power BI. When you come at this from data engineering, naming conventions are very important in Azure. That's much more important because you could have hundreds of items across hundreds of workspaces, resource groups. It gets way more difficult to find things. And billing on Azure is really difficult too. How do I is this a billing? Am I getting billed a bunch of money based on a data science activity, or am I getting billed a bunch of money on an ingestion activity? That is much more relevant when you're in the Azure space. So that way you can use those names of items to actually help you distinguish what's going on. Again, Azure has tagging as well. I don't think it's utilized to the best of its ability. And I would argue, Tommy, with you, there's not a good way of using tagging today. So the reason I'm so hot on this is I just did a session around for my live events group that I do. It's a user group of people. We just did a whole section on domains and tags. And I think those are two great features that are underutilized. And to organize your tenant and to clean it up and make it dev, test, prod, QA, all those should be tags. Those should be tagged things. You shouldn't need to have a whole bunch of items that are added with that information on the name of things.
Yeah.
So anyways,
No, that's great.
I'll pause. I'm getting really heated about all these things.
Dude, it's awesome, man. So,
Yes
well,
and no, I don't know. We'll see.
no, I think this is, like I said, it was a game changer for me and our Power BI developments in the past, just to organize everything on other teams, because the way you think about naming things and the way your brain works is very different than your person sitting next to you, which is very different than
Yep.
another department with their own acronyms and abbreviations.
Exactly. And that's, I think to your point there, Tommy, that just stresses the importance of having regular communication and setting a standard, making sure everyone's on the same page. That way there is more, this is data culture. We're talking like, this is a data culture item and you have to groom this together. Okay. That being said, thank you all very much. We really appreciate everyone on the podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Our only ask is, if you like this, if you like enjoying what we're doing here on the podcast, if you enjoy this content, if you're learning from us, we're happy you're learning from us. We love your engagement and chatting on the discussion here in live chat. Our only request is, please make sure you follow us online and share it with somebody else. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Share with a friend, since we do this for free. Do you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast, leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Awesome. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.